Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Eva, but you can call me Ada Newi. I mean, that's like very easy and bushy, but you can call me Ada Newi. Welcome to my channel. Basically, I'll be talking about the amputee lifestyle because that is what I know. So it's giving you a peek into how I think as an amputee, what I experience as an amputee, the experiences of other people that I get to encounter. So you'll be hearing a background noise. I mean, there's this renovation going on at home, so I cannot avoid the sound. So please just listen to my voice and pay no heed to the voice of the background, please. So in the amputee world, there's what we call the Ampuversary. So just like you have wedding anniversaries, you have birthday anniversaries, we have Ampuversaries. So Ampuversary is celebrating how far you have come being an amputee, the milestones you've achieved despite being an amputee, the resilience, and it's kind of like celebrating how you've held on despite being an amputee. So we call it Ampuversary, and for me it's going to be like my 12th year Ampuversary being an amputee. So I became an amputee on the 10th of November 2012. That was when I had my amputation. That was when I was medically declared a person with a disability. So it happened in November 10th, 2012. So I'm going to be giving you like a brief of my experience, what's happened to me, my journey before amputation and after amputation. So stay tuned. So before I had my whole issue, I was always that child that was very playful, very active. You always find me on top of a tree. You always find me on top of the tank. I was always climbing things. I was always running. I was always playing. I loved football. I loved dancing. I loved anything that involved me using my leg. I was a very active child, and I loved to play a lot. I loved to dance a lot, and basically whatever I kind of like put my heart and soul into revolved around my leg. So that was me post of amputation. So I was very active till like when I was 9. I think 9 was like the exodus of my journey into amputation. So when I was 9, we had a thing in school. So I was still in I was about to get into junior secondary school. I mean, I was an early school goer, and my mom had bought me a shoe previously, prior to that moment when I was about to meet her to get me a new shoe. And when we went, she was like, actually, I got you a shoe. That how is my leg growing? Like, what kind of growth am I having with my leg? So it was at that moment that she realized that there was something strange about my leg. My leg was dark. Like the left leg was darker than the right leg, and it was a little bit swollen, and it was hot. For me, I didn't really realize it. I mean, being a playful child, you don't realize all these things, but I did not realize that my leg was different from the other leg. My left foot was different from my right foot. I didn't even realize that it was hot. I didn't realize that it felt heavy. All I knew was that I was just normal, and I was just a human being. Basically, that was it. But my mom realized that there were differences between my leg, my 2 feet. So that was when she told my dad about it, and then they decided to take medical precaution. Okay, so before I go deep into it, I have like a chronicles of my experiences. It's not everything, but I have a chronicles to give me like a foresight on how to narrate the story. But it gets boring, and I don't really know everything that happened to me per se, but I could remember some, and I would narrate the story as I remember. So here's what it is. So after the whole issue of finding out that there were differences in my feet, so my dad thought it was kind of like a skin issue. So there was a nurse living in our house then. She was living in our compound then. So my dad was like, okay, Chisom has a leg issue, so I think it's a skin-ish and they were like, okay, they started giving me creams to rub and all that. So I was applying this cream. I mean, I applied plenty creams, but all of these creams didn't work. So, and they started realizing that the leg was getting big, like not really swollen, but it was kind of big, and it was dark, very dark, and it was heavy. So I started realizing that it was heavy for me, but it didn't stop me from playing as a child, because I still played with that heaviness. So they decided to take me to the hospital. So we were referred to National Hospital. So we met a doctor, and he was like, okay, there's this medicine they are mixing in LUT, Lagos State University, Lagos Teaching Hospital, I don't know, yeah. And he was going to bring it. They're going to mix whatever the thing was in Vaseline. So they mixed it. Like a week later, I went back, we collected the thing. So they mixed it in Vaseline, and so we're applying it. So he said it was like 4% or so, a certain percent. And so we're mixing it and we're applying it, and so far so good. It was kind of like clearing the leg. It was not reducing the size, but it was clearing like the darkness of, if I make my English, it was clearing the darkened spot on my leg. So my dad was like, okay, it has finished, let us go back to the hospital and talk to him and tell him that, okay, the medicine he gave us was having progress. And so we went back, and I was like, okay, since it was very effective, he thinks he's going to increase the percentage of whatever that we, whatever it is that he puts in the Vaseline. So he increased the percentage and went back home, and we were applying it. So it was at that point we realized that that's whatever it is was becoming harsh on my leg, and it started developing sore. So I had to stop. My dad was like, okay, we had to stop applying this. And so they started treating the wound. It wasn't really like a serious wound, but it developed a wound, and so we treated the wound and it cleared up, but the issue was still there. The leg, we then realized that the leg was having wound, and the wound would heal and come back, heal and come back, heal and come back, but it was like very, very teeny kind of injury. So we stopped, and over the period of time it cleared off. So mind you, I was still going to school. I was still in junior secondary school. I was going to government day secondary school, Caro. For you people that know Abuja, that was where I went to a government school. So I was still very active. I was a very, very playful human being. So please forget the background. They are renovating the house and it's annoying. So yeah, so I was a very, very playful person, and I was still playing despite having wound and everything, even though my parents said, don't play. So we continued like that, and so it wasn't like yielding any result, because I was still having that same issue. We went to the hospital to do tests and whatsoever it might be that I must be suffering from, and the only test that kept coming out was malaria. Not even typhoid, malaria. Anytime I go to different hospitals and I do a test, it's just malaria that always shows. But it's obvious that there was something wrong with my leg, but they kept seeing malaria and nothing more. So we got tired. So at that point, we realized that this might be a diabolic thing. So it was at that point to remember that we traveled to the village for my great-grandmother's burial. So it's possible that they did me something. So according to what they were saying, they said it's possible that I mashed poison that was meant for someone else, because for it to have lingered for that long means it wasn't meant for me, because if it was meant for me, it would have killed me at the spot or like some months later. But for it to have lingered for years means it wasn't meant for me, but I mashed it. Probably my playfulness made me to go and match what I'm not supposed to match. So we came back. So we tried to find other solutions. So in Nigeria, when you have an issue and you tell people about the issue, it becomes a community issue. So my problem became a community issue. So people had like opinions. I should not take you to this place. I don't take you to this place. So they decided there was this trade fair that was happening in Nyanya some years back. And it was kind of like just herbal medicines, people who were into herbal medicines, traditional medicine. So they just came, and so my dad was like, okay. Someone told him about it, and so we decided to go. And so we had to pick one of one of the people that were there for, will I call it an exhibition? They were there for the boss. You know how you have like a conference and you have booths. So went to one of the booths, and the man saw the leg. He diagnosed that, and then he was like, okay, we should come back the next day. But when we're coming back, we should come back with a fresh pair of razor and a bottle of Coke. So we came back that next day, and he was like, he took the things from us, and so next thing he opened the razor and he started making incisions on my leg. So my leg was now bleeding, so he poured the Coke on the leg. I don't know why. And then he applied something that it was just horrible. Like, it was dark, it looked like poop and it smelled. And he applied it on my leg. I was like, okay, I should go back, that I should just leave my leg like that for a while and whatsoever. So I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that, and when some doctors knew about it, they had this feeling that the leg must have gotten infected the more, because my leg degenerated to something severe after that experience. So the thing I started experiencing after that incision thing was that my leg started having sores, like not just having sore in a particular place, so different places have new sores. So my leg was like, it had this ulcer. There were ulcers all over my leg. My foot, I have to learn to use the word foot. So they continued like that, and we stopped using it because over the time the thing that he applied on the leg was hurting me, so I couldn't sleep. It was very painful. I don't know what it was, but it was painful. So they said I should stop using it because it was obstructing my sleep and my activity. So I stopped, and then they recommended another baba that was doing like all this leaf medicine. I went to his house in that same Kenya, and he made some herbal medicines. He cooked some leaf and everything. I said I should be drinking this one. I said I should be applying this one. So we took it home, and I was drinking it, and which was horrible. For you people that know me, know I'm a very, very selective person, but I had to drink it, and it was horrible for me. And then the thing that he said we should be applying on the leg was horrible for me because it was extremely painful. I don't know what it was, but it was causing me great pain, and I could not function well. I was always crying every night. I dreaded nights because it was at night I had to apply it, and it was extremely painful. I was always crying, and my parents had no choice because they wanted me to be better even if I was crying, so I had to just endure the pain. Over a period of time, they realized that it wasn't getting better. I wasn't getting better. My leg wasn't getting better. It was becoming like the ulcers on the leg was becoming worse, and they thought it was a case of diabetes, but they checked and I didn't have diabetes. So it was kind of like a very, very mysterious thing that happened to me because I still till now don't know. So I just stick to the fact that what the doctor said is osteomyelitis, and osteomyelitis is kind of like a bone infection that happens when bacteria comes from a wound, or bacteria enters into the bloodstream and it affects the bone. I still don't even understand the concept of osteomyelitis, and I don't know how it happened to me because there is no history of such in my family. There is no history of such situations that happened in my family, so it was kind of strange for me, but I had to stick with the osteomyelitis. So went to the hospital. I'm sorry, I'm going to be skipping some things because I can't remember some things that actually happened in the chronological order. So whatever that comes into my mind, I will say it. So I went to the hospital, one hospital in Maraba, and the doctor said it was osteomyelitis. So I just wasted it. So they said it was osteomyelitis and said there was going to be like a surgery on my bone too. So one of the ways to cure osteomyelitis is to do a surgery, and they're going to scrape out the affected part on the bone so that it doesn't spread to other parts of the bone. So that was what he said he was going to do. And then he went to the theater, and according to the state, I spent so much time I spent hours in the theater. And then I came out, even though I didn't see what they removed from my leg, but the chef said they removed something from my leg. And so after my leg started healing up, I realized that the injury the injury actually dried up for like a week or so, and so I was discharged. But after some weeks back, later it came back. So the wound started opening up. So it started becoming ulcerous? I want to say cancerous, but not cancerous. So it started having that ulcer thingy. Started having wound and all that. And so I had to go back to the hospital, and I think it was at that point that my life became miserable, because it was at that point that I started spending time in the hospital. It was at that point that I dropped out. So the period that I was having that severeness of this whole leg issue was when I was in SS1, Senior Secondary School 1. So I got into school. I still had, I'll put the picture of me. It's kind of blurry, but I'll put a picture of me. So it was, I have this, my leg was still very much having sores like this. I'm going to be very descriptive about everything. So the leg always emitted a kind of pus that was greenish, yellowish, horrible-ish. And so I remember there's one thing I always take to school, because one of the dressing you need to go to school is you need to wear a loafer, you need to wear white socks, and a short gown. So for me, I couldn't wear a loafer because my leg was quite very big, meaning I didn't find my shoe size. So they had to construct a sandal for me because I couldn't wear a shoe. So they constructed a sandal thing for me, and I was wearing the white socks. So what the white socks used to do is, when I wear the white socks, the pus comes out from the white socks, and that spot start becoming greenish, yellowish, and horrible-ish. And so I always carry cicatrine to school, and I always pour the cicatrine powder. Since it was very white, I always pour it on the socks so that people don't see it and it becomes disgusting to people. And I always carry the double socks to school. But it didn't still stop me from being playful. I was still playful, but my playfulness reduced to an extent because I had injuries. I mean, the wound was bad, and so I was skipping classes. I had a friend. She's kind of like I don't call her my best friend. I call her my soul sister. She's like my big sister. So she's my best friend, and she was part of the people that, part of those people that were in my circle that saw me at my worst. And so we're in the same class, we shared the same seat, and so I was always off and on in class. So a thing she did for me that I would never forget, I don't know if she still remembers, is whenever she copies her notes, she always copies mine and brings to the house for me to read. So she was always doing that. I don't know how she survived, but I think after some time she came to me and she was like, she can't really cope, that it's stressful for her. And to be sincere, I understood, because it's a stressful thing to be copying your own notes and copying someone else's notes. So it means you don't really have a life. And so it meant I was kind of like missing out in school. I come to school today, I don't come in the next 2 weeks, I come to school today. So that was how I was very, very inactive in school, and it was affecting my grades because I was having red pens a lot, and I was kind of like struggling. I was always feeling dizzy, I was always feeling tired. When I was in the assembly, I had to go inside the class. So it kind of like affected my social life because I wasn't able to socialize with my peers. I was always sitting down, I was always quiet, I was always calm and all that. So it degenerated so badly, and I had to drop out of school. That was in my senior secondary school too. In SS2, I had to drop out. So I had to stop school completely. So I was kind of like struggling with my health. I was struggling with, just trying to better, going to this place, going to that place to see if I find solutions, going to this church. There was this church we went to in Niger State. I must talk about it before I forget it. I'm not going to name the church, but we went to this church in Niger State just so that I would get healing. And we spent, like my mom and I, we spent like some nights praying. They were doing deliverance on me. And so they did deliverance. Like on the third day, it was kind of like a 3-day deliverance thing. and I was laying down because I couldn't walk. That was the extent. I couldn't walk at that period, so I was always lying down. So they came. I had bandage all around my leg because the wound was very big. So I'm going to use my leg. So this is my foot, and the wound was kind of like something like this. Yes, something like this. I don't have pictures of it. I don't know, my parents didn't document it, but that was how big the wound was. So they had bandage all around it, and so I went to this church. The amount of olive oil that I've taken in my life, I don't even think that any of Jesus' disciples must have experienced that kind of olive oil or anointing, because it was crazy. Like, I drank anointing oil, I soaked my leg inside anointing oil, and they even fought on the third day of the deliverance. Like, the people there to deliver me were fighting. So it was, my mom was like, I bet me will do come out for this place. Like, she said it in Igbo, and she was like, let's come out from this place. There was no hope for me, so we had to go back home, and we had to go back to, going to the hospital, from one hospital to another. And so we went back to that hospital, St. Anthony. That's the name of the hospital. We went back to St. Anthony, Maraba. So we went back to that hospital, and they were just, trying to see how to do things, and I wasn't getting any better. My mates had already written their WAEC. I couldn't write my WAEC because when I was to write my WAEC, I was being homeschooled. So when I was to write my WAEC with my mates, I wrote my exams. So I remember that I wrote English on a Friday. So I was coming back with somebody that stays with us at home, and a church member, one of my best friend, her mom saw me in the market, and she was like, Maduna. My name was Maduna before I changed it. My dad changed it to Eva. So she called me and was like, your leg is bleeding. And so it was on the bike. I just looked down like, what? My leg was like, it was removing thick clotted blood. And so the bike man had to take me home quickly, and they went. The nurse was still in our house, so she dressed the wound, and I was like, okay, let me prepare, and we'll go to the hospital the next day. Another hospital, not St. Anthony. I'll still come back to St. Anthony. So when we went to that hospital that morning, I went with my dad. So for people that have worked with me, they know that I am a very fast walker. I walk fast. So I was ahead of my dad. I was already walking in front, and he was behind me. And that morning, he called me. He was like, Chisom, your leg is bleeding. That was what he just said. And I looked. I had bandage all over my leg. I looked, and I was like, okay, yes, my leg was bleeding. So it felt like the leg realized that I had realized that my leg was bleeding, and it started bleeding. So I kind of fast walked into the hospital. And strangely, that day in the hospital, there were just two nurses on duty. It's a big hospital, but there were just two nurses on duty. They said the doctor had gone to play football. He went for his morning sports that early morning. So it was just those two nurses. And when they saw I was standing in my pool of blood because the leg was removing blood. I was thinking they were going to do something. My leg was just bleeding. My dad was panicky. The nurses were panicky. What was going to happen? And for me, the only thing that happened to me was that I remember that in biology class, I think it's in biology class, they talked about when you lose blood, how you would die when you lose blood. So that was the only thing that was coming to my mind, because I realized that I was losing so much blood as I was standing. So they took me to the dressing room, and the nurse was trying to cut out the bandage that was around the leg, and she was panicking. She was panicking. And so I think as she was trying to cut it, I don't know, I think she stretched the leg, and the next thing was that my leg started removing blood like a fountain. The thing was just coming like this. So the cleaner, that cleaner, may God bless her, this cleaner did, she went to get a bowl, so that probably to reduce her work. So she just put my leg under the bowl, in the bowl, so my blood was coming out, and the nurse was trying to fix everything, but it was not working. And so it was at that point I realized, my dad was holding me then, so it was at that point I realized that I was going I was going, so I started feeling dizzy. So the only thing my dad kept doing was he was just calling out my name, Chisom, 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 Chisom. And I think at that point I collapsed. Yeah, I think so. I think I collapsed. I according to my dad, he said I went, like I was off. I was no longer with them. And so he said they carried me. He carried me because they were calling the doctor. He wasn't picking, and they were telling him, so someone had to go to the place he was playing the sport to call him. And so they were planning to take me to, it was a private hospital, so they were planning to take me to a government hospital close by. So my dad called church people. I think that's where church comes to play, because for me, I think I see church as a family. And he called out, like he was an elder in church, so he called out to his fellow church people, and they all rushed to the hospital. And they were like, they carried me, and dad said they carried me, and they carried me, they were taking me to the car. So I think they were taking me to the car, and that was when the doctor was coming back. So they took me back to the hospital and they put me on drip. So I don't know, the doctor said it was a miracle, because he said my blood, I don't know if it's possible, but he said my blood had dropped to 5%. I don't know what the percentage means, but he said 5%, meaning it was a miracle that's supposed to have been dead, but I was still alive, and I didn't do a blood transfusion. So I'm not against blood transfusion, but I didn't do a blood transfusion because they gave me this drip, and then my mom made vegetables for me. So I kind of like, they were kind of like giving me the natural way to build back my blood. So that day I got better, and the next day I was discharged. So I went back home. So I didn't write my WAEC again. So that was in 2010. That experience happened in 2010, because I also have written my WAEC in 2010. So fast forward. So from then I had to leave the hospital. My dad took me back to St. Anthony. Yeah. So it was from there they took me back to St. Anthony. So remember I said I had a surgery before on my bone. It was in St. Anthony, but I got better, but I got worse. So I went back to another hospital. So I went back, and it was at that point that my life became horrible. So from 2010 to 2012, remember I had my amputation in 2012. So from 2010 to 2012 kind of like was the dark era of my life, because it was a very dark era of my life, because I cried every cry that there was to cry. I felt every pain that there was to feel. And the funniest thing was that as much as I pleaded for death never came to me. And I spent kind of like those years in the hospital. So I wasn't going to school, I was just in the hospital. Parents are paying hospital bills. So went back to St. Anthony, and they were trying to like feel. So the reason why I'm angry with St. Anthony was that St. Anthony was out of ideas on what to do with my leg, and he didn't really tell my dad about it. So he was just collecting my father's money, wasting my time, and not telling me, okay, you need to find a solution. So he was out of ideas on what to do. And I continued, I went to the St. Anthony. I was bedridden. I started developing bed sores because I was always lying down with my leg elevated. And so over a period of time, I started developing gangrene. For those who know what gangrene is when a part of your body starts drying up because of blood isn't flowing to and fro to that part. So I started developing gangrene on that part of my leg, despite having that size of injury. So next time I could see my bone. The bone on my foot. And so my leg was a disgust to me, and I was just hoping prayerfully that I was going to get better. And my leg started developing gangrene, and so the gangrene started affecting my toes. So the first toe that it affected was this one. So it affected that toe and it dried up. So the doctor came and was like, oh, this toe is dried up. Very, very insensitive human being. And he came and he plucked it off. He plucked off my toe, my very big toe. and I cried. No, I didn't cry at first because I just want to. I said, okay, I took these guys, I have photos. And then some days later, these other toes dried up. And so he came and he plucked out those 2 toes. So I was just left with these 2 toes. And at that point, I cried because, I mean, I'm a girl. You want to look good. And I loved shoes. And at that point, I didn't want my leg to be saved because it was a disgusting sight to behold. It was ugly. It was disgusting. I was ashamed of my leg. So, well, I cried. I cried that day because I knew it was gone. Like, it was not like there was going to be hope. You know, when you're still saying something and say, okay, probably hope will come. This one, it was like the toes were gone for good, except God is going to do an amazingly creative miracle to remove my toes out, or a Deadpool thing is going to happen. But my toes were gone, and I knew that they were gone for good. And so I was crying because I was pissed off. And so I continued that way, and the thing, what it started doing was it started having this strange pain, because whenever I elevate the leg, it always hurts me, so I tend to bring it down. And so it was kind of like a hassle for me. So what it started doing at that period was it started having constant bleeding. So the leg was always bleeding whenever I applied pressure. So pressure can be in form of singing. If I sing, it means I'm gonna be if you want to even use the toilet. So I was always mindful of what I eat, so I don't have to use the toilet. So I was always avoiding food, taking anything. The only thing I was just taking were things that were watery. So anybody that has seen me at that time would think I looked sick. I looked like most people thought I had cancer, because it was affecting my hair, it was affecting my growth, and it was affecting my look. I was looking so skinny. I was looking so sick. I don't know why I don't have pictures of this, but I knew I looked very horrible. My friends could know how I looked. And so, well, I was just in St. Anthony, just trying to survive and see if they would save the leg. And it wasn't forthcoming. The leg was just bleeding upon bleeding. So my dad decided to go back to that hospital so it's kind of like to that hospital where I had bled. So in that hospital where I had bled, before I left, the man suggested an amputation before 2010. He suggested an amputation to my dad. And I mean, as parents, you wouldn't want your first daughter, to have an amputated leg. So my dad was like, God forbid, it's not gonna happen. It's gonna be my daughter. And so we left. And so we had to go back because St. Anthony had no clue, and we're like running out of money. Thanks to church people that were kind of like, coming through for me and my family. So we went back to the hospital, and the doctor referred us to another doctor who is an orthopedics doctor, and so he had his own small clinic somewhere. And so we're there, and he looked at my leg and he said, okay, he was going to conduct a surgery on my veins, because he realized that my leg was always bleeding, so it had to do with my veins. And so I went in for another surgery on my veins on the leg. So he was trying to like suture it so it doesn't bleed out. And so after he told my dad that he noticed that my veins were cheesy, like cheese-like, meaning they were breaking off. The veins on my foot were breaking off, meaning they were weak. They were very soft, but he managed to like do it. And so for a while, I was fine. So one very fateful day, while I was still in the hospital, I think he came to do something, and the leg bled in a way that I have never seen it bleed. So like, I don't know what happened that day, and the next thing was the blood just came out. I don't know if open sachets of water, small, and just press it, the way it springs out. So that was how the blood came out, and it splattered on the walls, splattered everywhere, like just coming out. And I think at that point, because he had never seen my leg bleed, and at that point he was scared, and then he had to resuggest that I have an amputation, because he realized that the gangrene was going up. So the gangrene was kind of like going up. You could see the dark spots going up. So he said I had to have an amputation, because if it goes up, it's going to go up to my heart. So it's going to affect my heart, and when it affects my heart, it means I'm dead. So they gave me that option of either, maybe we can save the leg, and there's a possibility that if I try to save my leg I would die, or if I try to save my leg I have to lose my leg in order to save my life. So I had that two options: lose your life, save your leg, or save your leg, lose your life. And so it was kind of like it go and to and fro my family. Everybody were like, no, you cannot amputate. My grandmother would say, no, my granddaughter cannot have one leg. This one say, no, my niece cannot have one leg. This one say, no. Everybody just in my father's head. So they had to ask me. They had to ask the person with the problem. And as the person with the problem, I knew where it was itching me. I was tired. I can remember one very fateful day I was in the hospital. And she's not really like my auntie by blood, but I call her auntie because she's like, she comes through for me like an aunt. She'd come through for their niece. And so I call her aunt. So I was crying that fateful night because I had serious pains. Like my leg was hurting. Like the pain was excruciating. The pain was so much that I clenched my hands and I clenched my toes, my fingers and my toes, and the doctor said I had to stop taking St. Anthony. He said I had to stop taking pain relief because it was too much. But I needed it. I needed it like that. And my body was building a resistance against pain drugs because I had it a lot in my body. And so it was crazy for me because even the pain reliefs were not working. I remember that night I was crying and I was just saying, Auntie, I want to die. Auntie, I want to die. Please tell them to kill me. Please tell them to kill me. Auntie started crying with me. She's like, don't say that thing. Don't declare that kind of thing. Nigeria. I was like, don't say that kind of thing. I think at that point was when I had given up because I cried that night. I was tired. Like, I think everybody in my family must have cried with me because, I was crying every single day. The hell my family went through just trying to save me was crazy. And at that point when they were going back and forth on whether they should do this for me, do that for me, my mom even had to stop her work just to take care of me. Like that was the height of everything. The fought and go to and fro, let's do this, let's do that. So at that point, like, I was thinking of the pain I felt. I was thinking of the pain and the inconveniences it was causing to people. My sister would leave school and come and stay with me in the hospital. In the morning she'll go back to school. Like, everybody was affected by just me, and I felt bad. I felt like I was a burden. I just wanted to be independent. I just wanted to have that freedom. And I know that freedom had to come at a cost. And I just told them, please, I need this amputation. I didn't know what was going to be the outcome of it, but I just knew, like, just take the leg off. I didn't know anything about prosthetic device. So I knew at that point that I was going to be using crutches. I didn't know anything like prosthetic device really existed. So we went back to the hospital and we told the doctor, okay, we've decided to amputate the leg, and then he amputated it here, somewhere around here. Yeah, so he amputated it around there. And I remember that very fateful morning after the amputation, I wanted to eat myself, so they got me a bedpan. So when they put the bedpan, I was sitting down on the bedpan, and the next thing my leg went up Like, it felt so light. And I looked and I realized, I knew they were going to amputate the leg, but then I realized that my leg was gone for good. The same way I saw my toe leave me was the same way I saw part of my leg leave me. And I was about to cry. So I did something like, I think that was the sound I made. I was like, so my mom looked at me, like, Ogini. For you all that say I'm tough, I took it for my mom. She was like, Ogini. I was like, nothing. I just eat myself. I think that was the first time I tried to cry in anybody's front because of the leg. I had to deal with the pain alone. So it happened. I mean, I lost my leg, and it was after the amputation that the doctor introduced me to a prosthetist, and he told me about an artificial leg. So I got it immediately. No, I did get the artificial leg. Like, I got my measurement for it. I had to let the leg heal for like at least 6 months. And so while the leg was healing, I went to write my JAMB. Remember, so I told you I wasn't going to say the story in a chronological manner. So within 2010 to 2012, in 2012, before I had my amputation, I had gone to write my WAEC. So they carried me from the hospital. So I wrote my WAEC in a car. They carried me from the hospital to the school. So I wrote my WAEC in the school. I had teachers, everybody just watching me, and I was writing my exams. I had my legs elevated. I wrote my first JAMB. When I wrote the first JAMB, I met a classmate of mine, and he saw me, and I entered my JAMB center with my leg elevated, with the pillow and the stool and the stinkiness from the injury. I felt so ashamed. I mean, I was seated close to someone I used to have a crush on when I was still in junior secondary school, senior secondary school. And I felt so ashamed because everybody looked at me with pity. I felt so uncomfortable. My dad carried me into the hall. Yes, that was the height of embarrassment for me. But I didn't really pass in that JAMB. So I had to write my JAMB again in 2013. I wrote my JAMB again in 2013, and then I went to apply. So my dad decided to send me to a private school. So I think for me, that was the genesis of my other kind of pain. So I always tell people that I transitioned from physical pain to emotional pain. So for that, like few years before 2012, when I had the amputation, the kind of pain I experienced was majorly physical pain that went to my brain, pain that went to my heart, pain that went to every single part of my body, pain that left me disoriented, pain that kind of like separated me from people. So I didn't really have a social life. I just had my 2 friends that came to visit me once in a while. I had my siblings. I didn't really speak much with people. So I think that kind of like affected my social life, because I wasn't really very social. I didn't really talk much. I didn't really know how to meet people. I didn't really know how to mingle. So it was kind of like an issue for me. So I felt like that part of my life, where from 9 years old till 17, was kind of like a part of my life was just taken. It was trapped and it was stolen from me by sickness. So I didn't really have that feeling of, I'm 16, I'm 15, I'm 14. I was struggling with my life at that period in my time. I didn't have the time to have crushes on boys. And even if I had crushes on boys, my leg kind of like made me feel ashamed, made me feel less. So I didn't have time to have crushes. I was just trying to focus on my life and being alive. So post-amputation, I wrote my JAMB and everything. My work was good, it was clean. I passed my JAMB. So my dad wanted me to go to a private school so that I wouldn't have the hassles of being in a public school. And so I went to this school first. I went to Caritas. I'm going to call the school. I went to Caritas University, and I went with my sister. So she was applying for law, I was applying for psychology, and we wrote the exams, the same exams, and it's obvious we passed and whatever. And so she got an admission, you know, her private school. She got her admission, and my mom was called to the sides for me, and they said they can't give me an admission because of my disability. They said they can't give me an admission because of my disability, that I would not be able to go, because then I was using a prosthesis, but I had a walking stick, so I was still like in the early stages of using a prosthesis, so I wasn't walking very well. I was using a walking stick, and they said I wouldn't be able to thrive in the environment. I don't know the reasons though, but I felt it in my bones. Like, that was the first rejection I had after having my surgery. Like, that was the first rejection I had from an institution. A Christian institution was the first institution to reject me based on my disability. And so my dad got pissed. I was like, oh, people should just come back. There's no even need for Chidima to even be in that school. And I think I felt bad for her because she always wanted to study law. But because of me, my dad was like, okay, let her just be with me in the same school to help me. But she didn't help me, to help herself. And we went to Veritas University. So it was in Veritas University, but sadly for us in Veritas University, the courses we wanted wasn't being studied. So we didn't see law, we didn't see psychology, so we had to look for something that we could study in the variety of courses they had. So the thing that was kind of close to home, though, that made sense, was English and Literary Studies, because I've always been a writer before the whole thing. So we decided to study English and Literary Studies, and so it was in Veritas University I began to, you know, have that social life. I began to try to relate to people, try to have conversations, try to have crushes. And it was also in Veritas University that I had people who really said nasty things about me. People who really said nasty things about me. Like, I know these people that said nasty things about me, people that made me cry, people that made me feel bad about myself, people that made me feel bad about my situation, people who laughed at me, people who mocked me. I mean, I knew these people. I saw them. I heard from people what these people were saying about me, and I just had to survive, you know, through that 4 years in school. Thank God I cleared my papers, I graduated, I left Veritas University. And so, I mean, but despite leaving Veritas University, I tried to ensure that I was very active. So I was in a debater in Veritas University. I was debating department. I was always singing, even though there were some people that were saying, this guy's always singing people's songs. I know all these people, like, I know people that said things, nasty things about me. And so, I mean, it didn't really care to me at some point. I just knew that I wasn't going to last here, and it's just a phase of my life, and I was going to leave this environment, leave these people forever and ever. So that was kind of like me entering into another circle of, you know, pain, of having that feeling of rejection. Just even in Veritas University, I met the first boy that I liked. No, I had a boyfriend when I was 15 years. Jesus, my father sees this video. So it was not a serious, just first love thing. But it was in Veritas University I saw somebody I liked. But because he was short, people were like, Eva, you don't know this boy is short. But he was a fine boy. And as well, Basha, for you all that love, I mean, if he's short, I think it's even the short people that love people more. So that was Veritas University for me. Not really a memorable place for me, because it was a toxic environment for me. But I mean, the toxicity made me to form. It made me to have this hard self. It made me to be self-reliant. It made me wanted to be better, as long as I'm not associated with the school. So Veritas University was good. I had very, very good. I had good lecturers that really were interested in my well-being, lecturers that always read my poetry, which was very important to me, lecturers that always looked out for me. So I mean, the lecturers were good to me. But the students, most of the students were very, very unkind. And I know them, it's so crazy, but it's fine. So I think that was like my life. I still have series of experiences, even after school, NYC, the trauma I had to feel. I've also experienced things like, I've experienced things in this life. If it has to do with abuse in the office, I had this very crazy, I think I'll talk about it later, but I had this very crazy experience when I was working in NTA. So I had this experience that had to do with sexual abuse in the office. I've had experiences that has to do with rejection, that has to do with workplace violation, that has to do with discrimination, that has to do with sexual abuse, that has to do with, any kind of thing that could happen to someone like me. I think I experienced everything in life. I think it's one of the things that made me kind of like formed me, and it made me just want to go all in and fight and become so reliant. And it kind of made me find it hard to be vulnerable, because if there's one thing my friends always tell me is, if I need to let people in, Vienna is one person that always says this thing. Like, she always says, let people in, let people love you. I beg you. Well, I think this is the first stage of being vulnerable, sharing my story. So it's my Ampuversary. It's 12 years being an amputee, and my dream is to have the best prosthetic device. I just want to have a device that makes me wear heels, because I've always been a fan of heels since I was small. I've loved boots, heeled boots. So one day I get money to get a prosthetic device that enables me to rock heels, boots. So yeah, thank you, and stay tuned. I'll be sharing stories, I'll be sharing experiences, I'll be sharing insights, and I'll be sharing some fun things, travels, and whatever I have to share. It's just about me sharing my mind to the world and letting people know how I think, and letting people into my very, very boring tiny world. So thank you for staying, and please subscribe, and yeah, bye.